no thanks to Dred Scott. I think that's generally viewed as the worst.
So the two examples show a high point in the court's history and a low point. Your lectures this week here are called Making the Constitution Work. What do you mean by that?
I mean, it is an unusual thing in the history of the world. It has been a pretty unusual thing that 9 unelected people who are judges will decide and have really close to final authority. You can amend the Constitution, but it's pretty hard, as to what the meaning of this document is. Now, it's an extraordinary thing, too, what I see every day in the court. In the court in front of me, in that room, I see every kind of person you can imagine. I see people of every race, every religion, every point of view, and they're there to resolve their differences under law. Under law. Differences that they could be really angry about. I mean, think of how people feel about abortion. There are two sides, and they very, very, very angry one side or the other about the position of the other side. What about prayer in schools? What about Bush versus Gore? People got very angry about those cases. And yet still, by and large, not always, but by and large, people will, perhaps grudgingly, complainingly, thinking that the court's totally wrong, but they will tend to follow the interpretation that 9 people who are human and very fallible, what those 9 people give, the interpretation they give of this document. Now, there's a virtue in that. And the virtue in that is a country of 300 million people, a very diverse country, with all kinds of different points of view. That in that country, those 300 million very different people, now we say 300 million people and 900 million opinions, the 300 million people will resolve their differences under law and not with guns on the street or through riots or throwing stones or sticks or bullets or tanks at each other. Now that is an amazing treasure. It's a blessing for America. And I want to show people in that lecture yesterday that they cannot take that for granted. They never should take that for granted. It's something that has to be worked on, that's gradually evolved over time, that's cost us a civil war. We've had 80 years of legal segregation. That was this country. All kinds of things have gone wrong. And yet the history of this country is such that gradually one of its virtues is that these 300 million will decide things under law. And I wanted to show people enough so that they can see that that's important and that it has to be continuously worked on.
And as a justice, what is it most important to keep in mind in order to make the Constitution work, in order to sustain that public trust over time, knowing that the court will, from time to time, issue decisions that people will disagree with?
Well, today I'm going to talk about that. I mean, I don't think, really, if you're going to maintain a world, a country, a nation with a court, and maintain a system where people do tend to follow the court, even where what they do say is unpopular and could be wrong. If you're going to maintain that, primarily, it's a function of the people of the country understanding the importance of it. So it's more a question of education, and it's more a question of learning something about politics in this country, about government, about how it works, about participation. It's more a question of those things than it is anything the court can do. But that doesn't mean the court can do nothing. The court, if it's going to be trusted, has to merit the trust. And to merit that trust, I think the court does not hold its finger up to the political wind. There would be no point in having a court if it just held its finger up to the political wind. Why do it? We have a lot of people in the country better politicians than the 9 on the court. That would be crazy. But rather what the court can do, I think, is to interpret the statutes in this document in ways that work for people who are living now. When I try to summarize that in a sentence, I say it's a question of recognizing that in this document there are values that do not change. The values are permanent. the value of due process of law, the value of free speech, the value of protecting against unreasonable searches and seizures. The values that are incorporated in this document are permanent, but how they apply, that's a different matter, because life changes. So we have to apply permanent values to changing circumstances. That keeps this Constitution meaningful and protective for people who are alive today. Now, how to do that, how to make law work well without departing from the permanent value, how to make law work well for Americans today, well, that's the subject of what I'll talk about this afternoon.
And in your time on the court, it's more than 15 years at this point, what is a case or two that stands out for you that most represents the court doing this job well and doing it importantly for the country?
I hesitate because you don't know. I mean, Yogi Berra's statement's right. Supposedly he said, I never make predictions, particularly not about the future. And it's really the future, that will say whether we did our job right or not. I mean, things always look right to the people who do it. They always look right, because if they didn't look right, why would they do it? I mean, it's a question of what happens in the future and people looking back. I think and I hope that the people will turn out that when you evaluate, if I had to pick one set of cases, I would say I think the Guantanamo cases were pretty important. And I hope that it will turn out that we decided them correctly. Now, what happened in those cases, and there were 4, is that the president, in each case, was being sued by a detainee, somebody who was detained, in 3 of them at Guantanamo, and in the 4th, previously at the Guantanamo, and he'd been moved. In each of those cases, the person who sued the president won, and the president lost. And in each of those cases, the court, facing the issue in front of us, decided in favor of the particular liberty that the individual detainee was advocating. But the opinions are narrow. The opinions don't reach too far, because the court there is making an effort to safeguard the right of a very unpopular individual. One of them was bin Laden's driver. I doubt there are many who are less popular than he. But he had a right to come into court. He had a right not to be tried, we thought, under the statute, by a military tribunal, given the law as it was then. And he won his case. We recognize at the same time it's the president who has authority to protect the nation in case of war or serious national security crisis. So it's an effort to weave a line. If the court goes too far and it ties the hands of a president in times of real necessity, it will be difficult for the country. But if it abdicates its responsibility and does nothing for an individual who's being deprived of a basic liberty, then why have such a court? What's it there for, if not to protect individuals who, unpopular as they may be, are being deprived of a right to which they're entitled? I put the court to the test, those cases, and we'll see how history evaluates them.
Well, certainly at the present moment, it appears that those cases illustrate the court holding on to law, protecting individual rights, doing it in a narrow way, as you said, and quite remarkably getting the public, including the President of the United States, to accept it.
Well, I think that when the court does its job, that the public will generally approve. Because even though everyone would like to have his or her way, that's a normal part of the human condition. Yet I think people, when they stop to think about it, can accept an institution, the very point of which is to be independent, the very point of which is to decide under neutral principles of law to protect an individual, possibly even when that individual is very unpopular. I don't get my way today. But tomorrow, that same law will protect me if I'm the unpopular one. People understand that. They know that's the basic point of the institution, and therefore I think there is support for it.
And what do you